Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a concept that, honestly, has the power to completely rewire how you approach pretty much all of your goals. It's called the supremacy of motion over planning. And look, this isn't just another time management hack. It's a radical rejection of that heavy inertia that holds so many of us back. It's about taking execution and prioritizing it way, way above that exhausting, endless cycle of planning, researching, and, waiting for that absolute perfect moment to begin. If you've ever felt totally stuck before you even cross the starting line, well, this explainer is going to show you exactly how to break free. So, I want to ask you a question. Is your perfect plan actually just self-sabotage? Seriously, think about that for a second. For all the ambitious perfectionists and critical thinkers out there tuning in, and hey, we definitely know who we are, is your endless research really preparing you, or is it just a trap? We constantly convince ourselves, right? Like, if I just read one more book, or if I watch just one more tutorial, or if I map out one more contingency plan, then I'll finally be ready. But what if that intense desire for a flawless start is the exact thing keeping you completely stationary?
Section 1, the trap of perfection.
All right, let's get into the architecture of this problem. Why is this deep-seated desire for a flawless beginning structurally flawed right from the jump? Well, it all comes down to 100%. This is that elusive, magical target so many of us are aiming for. Ambitious people, especially the analytical folks, the nerdy scientists, the meticulous planners, we get totally stuck here. You try to optimize your very first step to 100% efficiency before you even begin. You want the absolute perfect workout program, the flawless business model, the ultimate optimized morning routine mapped out without a single margin of error. But aiming for 100% on step one, it's literally an illusion. And chasing that illusion leads us directly into what the sources define as the planning trap. Basically, this is waiting for more data, more resources, or maybe a consensus that, let's be real, may never actually arrive. You might tell yourself you're just being super responsible or really thorough, but let's call it what it is. This is the most common form of self-sabotage out there. It is self-sabotage brilliantly disguised as preparation. You aren't getting ready, you're just hiding from the friction of starting. Moving on to section 2, the ugly first step. Okay, so we know the trap now. What's the way out? Well, the unconventional antidote to this kind of intense paralysis is taking immediate, imperfect action. You have to embrace the ugly. Now, I know that sounds totally counterintuitive, especially if you hold yourself to really high standards, but you absolutely have to accept that ugly first step because it's the only genuine way to shatter that planning inertia and start building some actual momentum. Look, your first attempt at anything new is going to be messy. It's going to be inefficient. Honestly, it might even be a little embarrassing, but a messy, real action infinitely outpaces a flawless imaginary plan. The crucial thing here is how we frame this in our minds. If embracing the ugly just sounds way too chaotic for the critical thinkers watching, let's reframe it completely. Treat your first action as a pilot experiment. It's just an initial, imperfect attempt designed solely to generate the data you need to figure out your next step. You aren't failing, you're running a controlled experiment. You are extracting data from reality instead of just guessing at it on a whiteboard. And making that mental shift, it completely removes the crushing pressure of perfection. Which brings us to section 3, gathering real-world data. So once you launch that pilot experiment, you trigger this vital, real-time feedback loop. And this illustrates the core difference we're talking about today. On one side, you've got theoretical data. This is what you get from reading books, analyzing studies, listening to podcasts. And yeah, it's important, for sure. But on the other side, we have actual data. This is the direct sensory feedback of execution. The reality is, the most critical information you need to solve any complex problem, you're almost never going to find it in a book. You find it in the dirt. You find it in the friction of actually doing the thing. Actual data teaches you things that theoretical data literally can't even conceptualize. Let's use a highly visceral example to really make this concrete. 3 minutes at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you could go online and read every single article ever written about cold plunge protocols. You could study the deep science of brown fat activation or track adrenaline spikes until you are blue in the face. But all that theoretical data will never, ever tell you how your specific body, your personal N=1, actually responds to 40-degree water. The absolute only way to get that actual data on your recovery time, your breathing rate, your mental state, is to take that painfully ugly first step and just get in the freezing water. And taking that action immediately illuminates the gap between your beautiful plan and messy reality. First, you take action. Immediately, bam, you hit a bottleneck. And from that bottleneck, you redefine the question. Let's say you plan out this perfectly optimized 2-hour morning routine. You take action on day 1 and you immediately fail. Why? Well, you hit a bottleneck. You realize your real blocker isn't the complexity of the new routine, it's the fact that your current wake-up ritual is just terrible. Taking action redefines the question for you. It helps you tend to the parts of your garden that you can actually touch, rather than stressing over hypothetical weeds you haven't even grown yet.
Section 4. Building unstoppable momentum.
Let's talk about the brain chemistry here, because the psychological and neuroscientific payoffs of leaving the planning phase are incredible. The human brain is actually hardwired to prioritize completion and momentum. When you take that very first step, no matter how tiny or how incredibly ugly it is, your brain logs it as a completed task. This signals a totally natural dopamine release. It gives you a small, immediate psychological win, which instantly reinforces your belief in your own ability to actually change. Plus, it acts as the super powerful commitment device. Once you've invested even just 5 minutes of actual effort, psychologically, you are so much more invested in continuing than if you had just spent 5 hours planning. Action literally breeds action. I want to leave you with this absolutely killer quote from our source material. It says, "Don't wait for certainty, which is the lull before becoming a puppet. Embrace the stress of action and start the process of self-creation now." Waiting for absolute certainty basically just hands control of your life right over to external circumstances. You become a puppet, just waiting around for this perfect moment that honestly is never coming. Embracing the inherent stress and the messiness of action, that is how you spark the process of actually creating yourself and your future. So, here's my final question for you. Are you waiting for certainty, or are you actually building momentum? Because the supremacy of motion over planning dictates that the person who takes 10 messy, highly imperfect steps today is infinitely further ahead than the person still sitting at their desk, perfectly planning their very first stride. Stop over-planning. Just embrace the ugly. Go out and take your first messy step today and let the real-world data guide you from there. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.